Here we go with another cool episode of Herald Youth Forum from 1950s. Selected young girls and boys all around the world gathered and discussed about the world we want topic. They got very bright ideas and watch by yourself. They discussing about what does the word communism mean to you. Delegate students are Mirka Misic from Yugoslavia, Rennie from Union of South Africa, Norbert Scholz from Germany, Young-Koo Lee from Korea. As usual, presenter of the discussion is lovely Mrs. Helen Height-Waller. Let's see the video.
I'm from South Africa. I associate communism with Russian imperialism.
I'm from Germany. To me, communism means what's going on in the eastern part of my country.
I'm from Korea. Communism means to me the denial of basic human freedoms.
I'm from Yugoslavia. Communism means to me the theory which will exist in a far future and towards which my country is striving.
This is The World We Want, presenting student delegates to the 11th Annual New York Herald Tribune Forum for High Schools under the direction of Helen Hyatt-Waller.
Welcome to The World We Want, a television presentation of the New York Herald Tribune Forum for High Schools. For the 11th year, the New York Herald Tribune, in cooperation with Pan American World Airways, Trans World Airlines, and Scholastic Magazines, has brought some 33 students from as many countries to the United States for a 3-month visit. Each of the students has been selected in nationwide competitions in their own countries, organized under the auspices of the Ministries of Education. The 4 students participating in this discussion, along with the others, are just completing their visit in a 4th American host family. Then there will be a solid week together preparing for the final Herald Tribune Forum of 1957 at the Waldorf, and then we're all looking forward very much to a full week together in Berlin as guests of the Ministry of All German Affairs. Let me, however, now introduce you to the 4 participants in this discussion. From Union of South Africa, Rennie. Susan's a top junior golfer in her country. She's addicted to the out-of-doors, to the warm sunshine, and as you can understand, has made a great sacrifice to come here because it's giving her 3 winters, one right after the other. From Korea, Young-Koo Lee. Young-Koo, from the Hermit Kingdom of Korea, has learned quite a few new things since he's been in the United States. All right, Young-Koo, I won't say what they are. Maybe I might just say that you have learned to drive a car, haven't you?
Yes.
We'll leave it at that. From Yugoslavia, Mirka Misic. Mirka is a talented singer. Yes, you are. Plays the piano, does very well dancing her national dances, and is going to be an architect. Is it still an architect?
No, it's changed to law.
Oh, it's changed to law since you've been here?
Yes.
Well, good. I wonder if this has had any influence. From Germany, Norbert Scholz. Norbert is addicted to sailing, also to music. In his native Bremen, he has his own chamber music group that meets regularly. He's out of practice on his violin. No time here, Norbert.
No.
Have you practiced at all since you've been here?
Twice.
Only twice. Well, now, let's get on with our discussion. You started out with some definitions of what communism, the word communism, means to you that perhaps need a little more clarification. Who wants to start out here? You, Norbert? Right.
Yeah. In my opinion, communism in the original and pure form means the absolutely best and most human and most peaceful way of living. There's only one disadvantage. I think it's too idealistic and not realizable. If the equality of living and doing of all men would be possible, the natures of all men would have to be equal too. And that's not natural, because you can't find it anywhere in nature. You will always find that the strength dominates the weakness. Sometimes the communist doctrine itself is not realistic at all. Here I think of the neglect of the fact that people cannot do without religion. You will find again and again in human history that the destruction of religion meant the destruction of a whole circle of culture and meant the destruction and the end of a people. Here I think, for example, of the Mayas in South America. I think of Greece after the Hellenism. I think of the Roman Empire, and At last I think of Germany under Hitler's regime. Because we cannot measure doing and living by ourselves. Men are always changing. And I think that we need a greater scale and an everlasting scale. Another complaint I have to make is, if a system is really true and good, it doesn't need to be forced on other people. And I don't understand Marx's standpoint that the communistic doctrine has to be spread out by a world revolution.
But in the time when Marx lived, it was like this, that new society had to be brought out through revolution. Today, we realized, I mean, many people who are interested in that communistic theory, they realize that communism can be reached through compromises, through peaceful way, not only through revolution.
Mirka, is Yugoslavia a communist state?
Well, as I told before, we are striving towards communism, but if you want to make a definition, it's more socialistic state. We have socialism, or we don't have yet, but we are very near socialism.
Do you think that that socialism has benefited Yugoslavia more than capitalism would have done if you'd had capitalism instead of socialism?
Oh yes, I think.
Why? Why do you think? Why do you think that?
Because we did for 12 years much more than was done for 20 years of existence of capitalistic country, as Yugoslavia capitalistic country, which was before the war. So that we now have our industry. We have much more schools than we had before. We had less illiterate people. And this just through our economic life and how we live now, it shows that we reached much more than we had.
How has the standard of living, if it has improved in Yugoslavia, how has it improved?
Well, let me give you just one example. Before the war, an average worker couldn't send his children. I'm not mentioning that he could go on the seaside or in Slovenia, where are the Alps, for vacations. Now every worker sends, or his children or all family goes together, but every child was in Yugoslavia, who lives in Yugoslavia, whose father is worker, was on the seaside, was somewhere on vacations out of the place where they live.
I would like to tell you something, Mirka. As you probably know, after 1945, Germany was nothing at all.
Yes.
And in the same 12 years, we, with our system, came at least as far or even a little bit farther than you came. I would say that we got about the same help as you did. You got some foreign aid from America, and we did. We got the Marshall Plan. That's about the only thing we got. And in our system of government, we reached the same thing as you did in yours.
Oh, but listen, you were much more advanced than we were before the war. And you didn't have to fight against different antagonisms among the people, among the nations who lived in your country. You had your high level industry before the war, before Hitler came. You were more progressive, and in your standard of living was much higher. And what I think is that if capitalism stayed in a country, we would go a little further, but not as much as we did under the socialistic system we have.
Mirka, that's probably right. You said that you hadn't this sort of industry as we did before the war. Probably your country wasn't as much destroyed by the war as we were.
No, we were terribly destroyed. I think that, I'm not sure if I say more than you, but we lost, if I talk only about people, we lost every 10th person in Yugoslavia, so it means we lost more than 1,700,000 people. I think it's most number of all Allied countries who were in that war.
Mirka, diverting from the business of the standard of living and so on in Yugoslavia, I'm interested in your education. In Yugoslavia, do you learn about capitalism just as if it is another and equally good way of organizing a society? Or do you, what is taught about capitalism in your schools, is it as prejudiced as you feel American students are taught about communism in their schools?
Might be you would say it's prejudice, but I shouldn't say so, because we learn about capitalism as Marx explained capitalism. And I think that he explained it most realistically, well, from our point of view.
Then you believe in spreading out the communistic ideal by the world's revolution, as I told before.
No,
That's what Marx said.
I told you, well, Marx did a lot of works. He did about socialism, he did about capitalism, and his main work is how he explained capitalism.
I know that, but
listen, Susan asked me how we learn about capitalism. Do we learn that it's equally good system as it is socialism or communism, however you call it? I'm explaining about capitalism, how Marx explained that. Well, if you go further about theory, what would come after capitalism? He explained about historical inevitability. Do you say that?
Mm-hmm.
That historical inevitability is to change after capitalism to a more progressive society, which would be through socialism towards communism.
I think Sue's point is awfully interesting, Mirka, and if I understand her, what she's getting at is, have you found anything here in America since you came that was different from what you were taught about capitalism in your school in Yugoslavia?
Yes.
No, I don't think I found many different things.
Mirka, on this point of education, do you think that, or what facts in American schools, particularly in classroom discussions about communism, do you think that the teachers overlook? Do they stress certain points about communism and overlook other points?
I think that when here in America anybody mentions communism, they usually think about Russia, and in Russia there is no communism. Russia shows imperialistic, well, how to say it? But imperialism in their politics, and that's not what communism is by theory. And when you talk in schools, when you hear about communism, people think only about some bloody things, or Americans are usually very scared of any mention of
You mean they don't stress the good points?
No, I think if in America the people would learn about communism as much as we learn about capitalism, I think that there wouldn't be so much misunderstandings about that.
What do you know about American capitalism? You said you've learned much more capitalism than we are learning about.
Well, I know
communism.
about American system in government, and that American democracy, which protects that way of capitalistic production.
What's wrong with capitalism? Well,
don't you think that it's injustice that 100 people work for one man who gets profits?
Well, those profits are all enriches both the men who are working for the capital, the one who have the capital, and
why should you
yes.
have strikes then if it enriches
Then why do you
everybody?
have the bloody revolution? I mean, bloody revolt. Recently, the international communism suffered a mortal blow from which it cannot recover as the result of Hungarian people. And the free world now believes that communism can maintain its control, its hold on the people it controls only by force, and history tells that a regime based on force alone can be temporarily successful, as it is now in Hungary, but
Well,
in the long run it is bound to fail. And
Well, do you think, Mirka, which do you think is the best in the long run? Do you think that the capitalistic system will succeed, or do you think that the communistic system, if it is ever achieved, will succeed?
I should say that communistic system, or very near communistic system, would succeed.
But why?
Because if you go through history, I mean through starting of industrial revolutions and all these things, you'll see that workers didn't have so many rights as they have now. And these rights are achieved either through revolutions and bloody strikes or through compromises, as it is happening now in 40th, 50th years of this century.
You've got a pretty sharp difference of opinion here now. You say that you're convinced that communism is going to win out, and your point of view, Young-Koo, which you started to give a moment ago, you think
Yes, I think we are now engaged in the global struggle between communism and democracy. And when the final decision is reached, the only one ideology will survive, that of freedom or that of absolute surrender to the authoritarian state.
Well, now let's try to see which makes each of you so sure. I'm sorry, Sue, I interrupted.
Don't you think there could be some form of coexistence? Don't you think that you could have communism and capitalism together?
Well, I think when we are talking about the communism in its nature denies the coexistence with other capitalist country.
Oh.
Well, listen, because the communism were embarked upon the world communization, and they are dedicated to the overthrow of democratic government.
Will you be a good my friend
and
when
to
you
the
talk
creation
about
of one world into the Soviet image.
Yes, go ahead, finish, and then let Mirka.
And
Go ahead.
yes, that's true.
I just want to say you something, that Yugoslavia is considered communistic country too, but we don't deny coexistence. And in one conversation I had with you, you denied coexistence. You don't believe in coexistence.
No, I don't believe in coexistence with communists. Because,
Well,
take an example from
coexistence has to
Korea,
be.
we are now divided into two parts. We cannot survive divided, I mean half slave and half free. And communism itself, I think, repudiate the idea of coexistence. Even though they sometimes talk that they welcome the doctrine of coexistence, but what they have done to give the meaning to their words, they are waging war to overthrow the government, democratic government by one. And Korea is one of the examples, Vietnam and China.
Mrs. Wall, I just wanted to ask him, what do you think is coexistence if all countries in the world would have the same system of government? Why should you have coexistence? I think that coexistence is needed in the world where you have difference between countries, between governments which are in these countries, between systems which are in these countries. So it means if you want a peaceful world, you have to admit that coexistence with communistic country, because you're capitalistic, you are for capitalism, you're against communism. But, well, you be capitalist in your country, let the communists be communists in their country, and I think then world will be peaceful.
But Norbert, I wonder what about a divided country like Germany? You call that coexistence with communism in the East and capitalism in the West?
Well, I wouldn't directly say so. For example, it would be a wonderful and peaceful coexistence. I don't know how to explain that last year, 1956, 300,000 refugees from Eastern Germany came over to Western Germany and wanted to live there under the capitalistic system of life and not under the communist system of life. I'm sure that in Eastern Germany, the Russians don't exactly practice the communism, the ideals of communism, but at least it is called a communistic state. And as far as I know, the people don't feel too well over there.
Norbert, does the government or the branch of communism practiced in Eastern Germany, is it the same as the branch of communism or the socialism practiced in Yugoslavia?
No, it is entirely different. In Eastern Germany, it is a forced sort of government. The Russians invented it in Eastern Germany. And the people in Eastern Germany, my brothers who live over there, have no right at all to vote. Well, they have the right to vote, but they can't vote only for one party, and that is a communist party.
But political rights aside, does Eastern Germany follow a program similar to that in Yugoslavia? And has the standard of living risen in Eastern Germany?
The standard of living in general is very low. For example, you would pay, I just want to tell you some examples, for a pair of good shoes you would pay in Eastern Germany between $40 and $50. and other prices are as high. For example, butter in Eastern Germany is extremely high. So most people can't afford to live from butter of these high prices, so they live from some sort of margarine, and they produce this stuff from coal. It's entirely artificial, and it's a terrible stuff. This is only some examples. The standard of living in Eastern Germany is very low. But there are some other things which are very good in Eastern Germany. For example, the education of the youngsters in some respects are very good. In the scientific branch, the students who come over from Eastern to Western Germany are much better in all sciences than we are in Western Germany.
Is that also true in North Korea? Do you know, Young-Koo?
Oh, yes. In North Korea, the communism, which is actually working out, is what is being done in Russia. And I suppose, Mirka, you believe that the Yugoslavian communism is a real communism, and it is nothing to do with the Russian communism. But in my opinion, I think Yugoslavian communism is another brand of communism, and as far as it is a communism, I think it is antithesis of freedom. It opposes what freedom stands for, because they don't approve the fact that each individual has his own talents, and but democracy recognizes that everyone has not one but variety of talents, and freedom says that develop them and the whole community will benefit.
All right, Mirka, how do you...
First of all, I don't think that that we have to bring out the points we have read somewhere about something.
No, let's talk about you as individuals. What are the basic points of disagreement between you and Young-Koo on this matter?
I tried to explain to Young-Koo that he can't judge a system through war.
Well,
Because in war you have killed people, in any war. Whoever is it in that war. So in Korea they had war, Northern and Southern Korea. And America came in that war.
Yeah, but let's stick to this
but
basic point.
yes, but the war, most of the wars were responsible for the communists. They are to blame for those wars. And communism cannot be considered apart from the war, which they think as a means of spreading their doctrines, their ideals, their enslavement throughout the world. And you talked about me, that you blamed me that I am prejudiced against communism because I've only observed the war where the two contending troops kill each other. But the war was broke out by the communists, and they believe that defensive war is morally lawful. We believe those words to some extent, and why you said in peacetime that communism is so good. Why so many thousands of North Korean soldiers and Chinese refuse to return to their communist-dominated homeland? They lived under the communist society in the peacetime.
Mirka, on this question of freedom and coexistence, is there much freedom in Yugoslavia? I mean, are the minorities and the small sections given rights?
Yes, much more, Susan, than before the war.
Mirka, just 1 second. I think, let's come to this point, but I think we ought to finish with this point. Norbert, you had something to say on. I'm trying to find out where the four of you, who are such good friends, basically differ, if you do. And Young-Koo and Mirka have raised this point of whether communism deprives the individual of developing his own potential as a free man or not.
No, it doesn't.
Well, it does.
What do you say, Norbert?
I would like to add something, a very small thing, to Young-Koo's wonderful and long speech.
Yes.
I think that the communism is not responsible at all for any war, because it was not a real communism which was practiced then. And I think the governments of this state and of this state and of that country only took the communism as a reason and said, well, you'll be fighting for communism. And actually, I think in many cases they were not fighting for communism at all. It was just, a reason for doing something.
Now, explain your point on this,
I
Mirka.
don't think that communism would taught somebody not to develop himself as a personality. What I mean to say, well, I'll talk about my country. I'm not going to talk about the other country. But in Yugoslavia, if you go to school, you are free to choose whichever school you want to go. If you go to college, you are free to choose whichever college you want to go. You are free to choose your profession. And I think that's freedom. Well, that's a form of freedom.
You mean that those things are of your own choice?
Yes.
And you can do that voluntarily?
Volunteer, of
Oh,
course.
yes, under the communist domination. Many
What would you-
soldiers were drafted on the basis of voluntary will, and they volunteered to the army, but, you know, the communism presses, not
Well,
directly. They indirectly
How
presses
do
the
you know
people to volunteer. Because I experienced. I was
What?
under the communist domination for 3 months. But
Oh.
3 months, it wasn't too short period for me to observe.
Oh.
And you said your country is standing for socialism, communistic socialism, and we free people are standing for capitalism, which is
We are free too, so don't...
Yes, I know,
don't
but
think so.
well, in socialism, the government are striving. They are taking over all the problems of the people, and they are trying to solve with their own hands. But so, can the government control of the life of people be accomplished without disregarding those restraints which safeguard liberty?
Have you got an answer to that, Mirka?
Oh, I don't think I understood all these words he used in last sentences.
Well-
My English is not so good. But what I think, Young-Koo saw communism 3 months. It was in the war where they had a military rulement, or how do you say it, government. And you couldn't expect anything better from the war. You can't expect in the war people to say what you want to choose. Will you be so-and-so? Will you be that and that? Who wins?
Well,
Rule.
we aren't getting to a conclusion here because Young-Koo goes back, I'm sure, to his point that communism is what causes war. I'm sorry, our time's almost up, and I know you've just begun to get into the subject. Can I ask you, I'm sorry, time goes so quickly. Can I ask you, just briefly, each one of you, how you think you're going to get, or we're going to get, from the world you've got right now into the kind of world you would like to have?
I think the first thing we have to do is break down the barriers created by nationalism.
And some of those have been obvious here.
Yes, quite obvious. Here we are, 4 people, and while we've been here, we've been best of friends. But the moment we get into any type of political discussion, you can see the background coming up, the nationalism rising, and we become 4 completely different people.
It was quite nationalism. It was more ideas.
Wait a minute, yes,
I don't
no,
agree with
inspired by
Susan.
nationalism.
For example, take the example of my country. If we wouldn't have nationalism, we will never be one country again. We will be divided forever, for all time.
We have to hear quickly now from Young-Koo and Mirka.
I believe that the world we want in the future would be the one world
You want.
where the freedom is assured. And I don't believe we can live with the communism, which itself denies the
All right, one
coexistence with democracy.
Quick word from Mirka.
I think that through peaceful coexistence, through appreciating each other's ideas and living in your country, not spreading out, we can get the world we want.
I'm sorry, that's all the time we have. Until next week then, at the same time.